My name is Pat Gorley, and I've been in Denver, Colorado since 1972. My HIV work started in the early 1980s, probably 81 and 82, primarily through the Gay and Lesbian Community Center. The 1970s was a time of sexual liberation and excitement. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll kind of sort of thing, for sure. When I picked up that there was something going on, was reports coming out of New York City and Los Angeles primarily of these very strange, life-threatening infections. The thirst for information about AIDS was unbelievable. You know, people were now starting, it was now starting to sort of inch and ink out enough that different people were getting touched personally by it, through people they know who were getting sick or perhaps through themselves. And so people really wanted to know what they could do to fend this off. Who was going to get it? Who wasn't going to get it? The epidemic blossoming in Colorado was a little bit behind the coasts. It took time for it to move inland. The worst years were from, certainly here in town, from 89 to probably 96. I mean, there were months in the AIDS clinic just at Denver Health alone where we would have a death of one of our clients a day. Probably the most impacting was the death of my own partner in 95. The day before he went into the hospital and died, I have been a fan of the Grateful Dead for decades and decades, and I used to drag David along to that. And one of the things I picked up was a purple sari. A piece of cloth, a large piece of cloth, and I distinctly remember it was early fall and it was pretty warm. But I took this purple sari and covered him with it, and he said, "That's very comforting." I think that an AIDS grove, perhaps here, that gets refurbished, and what that could mean for all sorts of people again is just a quiet place of contemplation. And there aren't a lot of those in our world today. The Dalai Lama said that when you're talking, you learn nothing that you don't already know. It's when you're listening that you actually, might pick up on something. So I think a place where people can go and sit still and think about the whole human condition is worthwhile.